Welcome to 2016 Presidential Candidate Interviews. Today I'm interviewing Harry Braun. Mr. Braun is running as a Democrat. Hello, Mr. Braun, and welcome to 2016 Presidential.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Lee.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. Let's get into some icebreaker questions, just so the voters can become somewhat familiar with you. Can you describe your family and home life?
Sure. I'm married to my wife, Dorothy, and we've been married for some 20 years now. And we have a little dog called AJ. It's a Dachshund dog who's kind of one of the family. And that's pretty much our family at this point. And most of my time is spent on my work and research that I've been involved in since my undergraduate work at Arizona State University in the 1960s. So I've always been pretty fascinated with my work, and I'm engulfed in it. It's interdisciplinary research, and it bears directly on this presidential campaign I'm now involved with.
Great. What are your hobbies and interests?
Well, my interest is in maintaining my health, of course, and I don't really have hobbies per se. I don't really watch sports, for example. I'm so busy with my work. I like to explain to people that we live in this exponential age where, and most people don't understand exponential growth. Some people do, but we should probably talk about it a little bit because all of our major issues and problems that we have right now in the country and on the planet are all worsening exponentially. And very few people understand what that means, but it's very bad news. And that's one of the reasons I'm running is to help people understand this basic arithmetic. And there are some excellent YouTube videos by a Professor Albert Bartlett, who's a physics professor at the University of Colorado, he's the high priest of this subject. And I encourage everyone to go to YouTube and watch his videos so they understand how this whole issue of growth, and much less exponential growth, which is far more serious when you understand it. It's right now involved in a mass extinction event for our entire planet, and it's very important that people understand it, and that's an important part of my campaign.
Okay. In this part of the interview, there is questions about your work. Did you want to describe your work or employment further?
Well, sure. I'd be happy to. I've had a fascinating career, and I've been spent most of it in working as a research analyst. I've also been a CEO of a number of companies that we worked with for more than a decade at the McDonnell Douglas facility in Huntington Beach, California, with some of the best and brightest engineers I've ever worked with in my life on some world-class solar technology that held the world's record in efficiency for converting solar energy into grid-quality electricity. Actually, the McDonnell Douglas engineers have developed the core concentrator system, and a Swedish firm named Kockums had developed the Stirling engine. It was a four-cylinder Stirling cycle engine that was put at the focal point of the dish, and it made electricity from the sun directly, and it was at a 30% conversion efficiency. And we spent more than a decade on that particular technology before my research focused more on wind systems, and I am the CEO of a wind energy development company that developed a $150 million wind project in New Mexico. It's called the Mesa Wind Project because the turbines are put up on a mesa. And my thrust in this presidential campaign is to get a whole country in the wind business because it's a great business to be in. We finished that project in 2005, and I haven't done anything really on it ever since, but they keep sending me checks. And that's because the wind business is renewable. It goes on essentially indefinitely. A wind project, you can always upgrade the turbine. So why are we building nuclear plants, and why are we building fracking, poisoning our aquifers, poisoning our planet, when we never needed to do that? And on my website, I show the fact that what we really want to do with this wind-powered electricity is pass that electricity through water to make hydrogen. That's what water is made up of, is hydrogen and oxygen. And when you pass an electrical current through water, which you could do on your desktop if you have a dry cell battery, with the two wires coming out of it, and you put the two wires in the water, well, then you start electrolyzing is the term that's used, electrolyzing the water, which means you're separating it into its two constituent atoms of hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. Well, that's something that was first done in the year 1800 by a very eminent physicist in Italy named Volta, Alessandro Volta. So he developed the world's first battery in the year 1800 at the World Fair. It was a big deal. Every world news event, if you will, of the day. And 3 weeks later, two Brits, one who was a surgeon and the other who was a chemist, who were friends, they reproduced Volta's battery in their lab, and then they passed the electricity through water. So they were the first humans to be making hydrogen from water with electricity. And that occurred in also the year 1800. 7 years later, the very first automobile was built in the world with an internal combustion engine in Switzerland, and it was running on that kind of electrolytic hydrogen fuel, not toxic gasoline.
Interesting.
So the technology has been around for more than 200 years, and we just haven't been using it.
Interesting. Back to the icebreaker questions. Do you have a favorite place to eat out?
Well, my wife and I, we do go out to our favorite restaurant, I suppose, when we do go out is out back. We live in northern Georgia, in kind of not quite in the mountains, but in the foothills on the way to the mountains. But we avoid actually restaurant foods, and we avoid most of the foods in the supermarket because it really isn't fit to eat. We have terrible food in this country. It's junk food. It's causing epidemics of disease, obesity, cancer, heart disease. We put all this refined sugar in our food and we give it to our kids and poison them with it. What we do is god awful. We don't have food that's fit to eat. And then when you do go into the supermarket and you try to find a fish, the wild fish are all gone. People need to pay attention. When the oceans are dead and gone, that's most of the ecosystem on the earth. And the oceans it's a 3 billion year old ecosystem, and it's almost over for it. Now, we're hunting to the last fish now, like we're hunting to the last rhinos and the last elephants. That's what we are involved in, what has been the scientists, which is the world I come from. I'm a hard science person, I admit it. And all the scientists who are following this around the world, they call it the sixth mass extinction event in the Earth's 4 billion year old history. But this is far worse than the first 5 mass extinction events, because all of these oil-based poisons that we've been using instead of hydrogen for the last 100 years, we could have been on the hydrogen economy. No, the oil companies had to make all this money, and oil is an incredibly toxic substance. Gasoline is an incredibly toxic substance. If you even breathe the fumes, you're in big trouble because this goes right into your blood. And what these poisons do when they get in your blood is they melt down your proteins, just like if you've ever, when I was growing up as a kid, I watched car mechanics washing off greasy automotive parts with a glass, but they didn't have water in it. They had gasoline with a little brush, and they would brush off the parts of gasoline with their bare hands. And this gasoline goes right through your skin. It's nasty stuff, and yet most people have no idea how nasty it is, and we produce trillions of gallons of it and release it into the atmosphere. Once we burn it, all of it, it's toxic from the point of finding it to the point of using it, and then when you're done using it, it goes up into the atmosphere, and that's why we're having this climate change chaos that's out of control now, and there's nothing that can stop it other than get ready for it, and I don't see anybody in our country even aware of the problem, much less what to do about it. So I'm so busy with those things that it's hard to focus on things like hobbies and going to and watching sports games, for example.
Okay. I'm guessing based on your previous answer, you probably don't have an answer for your favorite junk food and your favorite fast food joint.
No, in fact, I have an interesting spin on this. I do a lot of research, and I'm a hard science guy, and I even wrote a paper. I know you asked some questions about religion. But one of the most amazing things I found comes from a religious source, believe it or not, and it happens to be Jesus, except it's not the Jesus of the New Testament. That's a very different Jesus from the Jesus that you read about in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the difference about the Dead Sea Scrolls is they're real documents in the sense that you know where they came from. And they were written in Aramaic, And their books on this subject. One's called the Essene Gospel of Peace. And you find out Jesus actually grew up with the Essenes. And most people don't know who they were, but they're an ancient Jewish sect. But what's fascinating to me as a scientist is that they were scientists. They were the scientists of their day, and eating was one of the most important things they did was how they prepared food, and what they ate, and under how much you could eat. I mean, incredible. If the Americans today knew what Jesus was really preaching, and this book, the Essene Gospel of Peace, for example, you can read it, and it's an astonishing book to read because and they were the Essenes who could read and write, which was rare for the day, and they had an entire community and cities out in the wilderness because they didn't like the cities. They thought they were polluted and the water you couldn't drink. Yeah, kind of like what we are. We're in a much worse situation than they were. But they had the problems in their day. And when you read about what Jesus was really, his miracles weren't supernatural miracles. He healed people because the Essenes taught him how to do it. Naturopathic medicine, and the most important part of this, and they even learned this from Hippocrates, the ancient Greek physicians, who said, let food be your medicine and let medicine be your food. And there has never been wiser words ever spoken. And because I have a background in molecular biology, that's my passion. If you want to know my hobby, it's molecular biology. I live in a world of proteins, and because I believe these proteins, and they're in all living forms, from a virus to a human being, has gazillions of proteins. Viruses maybe only have a few. Some viruses only have one. But nothing's alive if it doesn't have a protein in it. And these poisons that we mass produce every day and that we breathe in this polluted air and drink in our polluted water, and it's all contaminated. There isn't any pure water anywhere on the planet. You can't drink any. I live in a golf course in Georgia with overlooking a beautiful part of it. It's in an old-growth forest, and there's a creek that runs down it, except you can't touch the water. You can't. We live in a poisoned paradise. And that's the problem. And most people, and I live in a pretty nice neighborhood here with a lot of doctors and lawyers, and they're clueless. And the people come out and spray poison. The University of Georgia says they spray 10 times more poison on the neighborhoods than the farmers spray on their crops. Okay. It's utterly out of control. Right. So, yeah, that's a big issue for me, and because it creates, let me tell you, when you melt down your proteins, they're called amyloid plaques in the scientific literature, and they are at the heart of all the cancers, all the dementia, all the autism in children. In fact, they find these amyloid, and what an amyloid plaque is, it's a protein that got melted down. It's a gooey, sticky mess of amino acids, and it's so sticky that if you try to, the investigators that manipulate these things with their tools, they can't get the things off their tools even with high-temperature steam. Well, so these amyloid plaques stick to each other and create blobs, and when the other proteins come up to them, they melt them down too. And all of your memories are stored in proteins. All of them. Not just stored there, the proteins make the memories. The proteins communicate the memories. Because the proteins do everything in molecular biology that's important. In fact, the proteins are so complex, no supercomputer has yet figured them out, how they do their chemistry. That's how incredibly complex proteins are. And we treat them like, well, we're poisoning them. And they're the key life source within us. In fact, I would argue as a scientist, I have a paper called The Revealing Science of God, that the proteins are our creators, our biological creators. And that isn't a theory, that's just a hard-nosed fact. Because there is nothing alive that doesn't have these incredibly complex creatures in it. We call them proteins. In my book, I refer to them as nanobes instead of microbes. Like a bacteria is a microbe, and that's a much bigger organism than, let's say, a nanobe. But all bacteria are loaded with nanobes. These are the proteins. Because the nanobes build all the bacteria in the world, on the earth. And they use them as like their little spaceships. Viruses are also built by the proteins, because that's where a single protein can get in. It's kind of like its personal RV vehicle, and it's buzzing around the body. These proteins are part of a 4 billion-year-old civilization that's been on the earth, created every living form that's ever been here, and we are killing them with our oil-based poisons so that a few corporations can make a lot of money.
Okay. We were going to get into the serious questions, and I think you've probably answered them to some extent. The first 2 serious questions were going to be, why are you running for president, and name some unique abilities you would bring to the office. And I'm guessing you're running for president to address some of these scientific, environmental issues, and some of the unique abilities you would bring to the office is your knowledge of the science and the environment. Would that be a...
Yeah, we're in a mass extinction event, and exponentially speaking, it's almost over.
Okay.
You know, and the oceans are 90% dead or 95% dead. Now, nobody knows for sure, but they're almost all gone. Nothing's going to reverse.
As a president, what would you... Is there some kind of...
Yeah, there's immediate stuff we have to do. Every day counts. The first thing I would do is, we have a government that's so corrupt because we all think we're a democracy. Everybody says we're a democracy. I hear the president say it. I hear journalists say it. Newscasters say it. They're all liars, or they're stupid, because all you need to do is check with a dictionary to know that the United States has never been a democracy, ever. It is and always has been a republic.
Exactly. It was meant to stop the howling masses, not respond to the howling masses. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Oh, it was meant to stop the howling masses from influencing government, not make the howling...
Yeah, I keep hearing that. The democracy is mob rule. But you know what? Let me just say that, first off, we've never been a democracy. And let me also explain what the difference is, because most people have no idea. They think a republic is a democracy. It's not. A republic is ruled by a tiny number of people, like elected officials, who in secret get bribed by lobbyists. When you elect people back to the Congress, there's thousands of lobbyists that are going to come and bribe them. And it's all legal. It's just like all these presidential candidates. They're raising all this money. It doesn't matter whether they win or lose. They get to keep the money they're raising. So do the members of Congress. They spend 99% of the time raising money, and then they get to keep it when they retire.
Correct. So this
is crazy.
As president, you would try and address some of the special interests. It's
all special interests. And who are those special interests? It's mostly the oil companies. Because most people don't realize, unless they read the New York Times, that the oil companies now also own all of the Wall Street banks. They own all of the pharmaceutical companies of any size. They own all of the major news networks now, which is why you never hear about the fact that these wars we're involved in right now in the Middle East, that we hear about ISIS and we hear about the Ukraine, those are oil wars. They just, nobody says the truth. They don't realize it's all about oil, and we don't need a drop of it. We should leave it in the ground. It's poisoning the planet. So we got to get off of oil immediately, and we don't need it for oil. We never did. But because I come from an engineering society that's the largest of its kind in the world, and what we want to do is shift from oil to hydrogen, the hydrogen economy, and there's a second part of that, which is the cannabis part. As Henry Ford... Because when you talk about making hydrogen, yeah, you can make it from a wind machine with the electricity it generates, and that's my basic premise. You can build 2 million wind machines, 2 megawatts each. You know, my papers are published in chemical engineering journals, and they're available for anybody to double-check my calculations. But 2 megawatt wind machines would displace all of the oil, all of the coal, all of the uranium, all of the toxic fuels that we now use, we would not be using with 2 million wind machines, because they would be making hydrogen from water, and then when you burn hydrogen in your car, you get the water back out of the exhaust pipe, and it would be the purest water you will ever get your hands on, is to collect what comes out of your exhaust pipe in a little stainless steel vessel, or glass, which is what you would do, and take it in and make coffee when you got home. You're sure not going to do that with gasoline. But that's how incredible this solution is, and we can modify everybody's existing car, moped, space shuttle. All of our moon rockets ran on hydrogen. It's the most abundant element in the universe. it's much safer than gasoline if you get into an accident, and yet nobody knows about that any more than they don't know that we're not a democracy. We're a republic. So the first thing is, I have, as it turns out, if we don't, we better get past the oil lobbyists. And so I have a democracy amendment that's at the heart of my campaign, which is 28 words long. It's a one-sentence amendment, and it simply says we the people are going to empower the majority of citizens to approve all laws and all Supreme Court decisions, for example. Because much of the Supreme Court, that's the problem. Those people aren't the solution. They are the problem. You got 5 people, and they always make their rulings in the interest of oil companies and chemical companies and mineral companies, the people that have vast wealth. That's who they represent. Those Supreme Court people have committed treason against our planet and against our people because they have poisoned every man, woman, and child in our country, including the babies who are now born with those amyloid plaques I was telling you about. And this is not just, this has been on, if you probably heard of Sanjay Gupta, who's a professor of medicine, who's the CNN's chief medical correspondent. He had this on a 2-hour documentary called Toxic America, aired in 2010. You can still go online and try to find that documentary, although it's hard to do these days. They don't want people to see what he was saying, that the kids are born with their minds melted down before they're born. And that's why that's what this autism is. It's the poison in us. It's melting down those proteins. And the public doesn't have a clue.
Interesting.
So this is a mass extinction event that we're in, and we got to stop it. This isn't a state of emergency. This isn't just a presidential campaign. In fact, my presidential campaign is actually organized as a constitutional convention. And I use that word because that's what's in Article 5 of the United States Constitution. Article 5 is a very short paragraph that deals with amending the Constitution. And in Article 5, if anybody bothers to read it carefully, which I've done, it says that you can amend the Constitution by having the Congress pass an amendment, and then it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. But what people don't realize is that Article 5 also says that the citizens can bypass the Congress in what they call constitutional conventions. And the citizens can put forward their own amendments and ratify them in the same way they have to be ratified if the Congress passes it, which means 3/4 of the states have to vote to approve it, and that would incidentally be 38 states. I need the majority of citizens in 38 states to go to our Democracy Amendment USA.net website, where they can, and this is really importantly, they can download an Article 5 citizen ballot at no cost to them. They just download this ballot, and the ballot's going to deal with one amendment only, the Democracy Amendment, to put the majority of people in charge of both the federal. Initially, it's the federal government, but we need to do the state legislatures as well. We got to get lobbying and money out of politics. Bribery should be illegal, in my view, and I think the majority of people would agree with that view. And if that's the case, then the majority is now going to be in charge. There's not going to be any lobbyists in the way, because lobbying is going to be illegal in the new United States Citizens Congress, which is what's going to replace the existing bribery-based Congress that we now have. And all of this could happen next month if we have enough people get this message and go to their download their ballots. And by the way, that's a paper ballot you're downloading. And the registered voter fills it out, mails it in to their Secretary of State's office, where they can then validate that this ballot is valid, that this is a registered voter, and they have signed this ballot, and it's calling for this amendment to be ratified. Wow, that's absolutely legal according to the Constitution.
That's very interesting.
They can't stop it. The oil companies can't stop it. The Congress can't stop it. The people can do this themselves and put themselves in charge. So that my objective as president is to first act that I would do is make sure, even before I get to president, I want to get this amendment passed so that the majority is now in charge. And once the majority's in charge, you have to think of it this way. Some people call it mob rule. I call it a universal mind of maybe 250 million people who are going to make the decisions that govern us. That's a universal mind that's far superior to anybody's single mind, and I put my faith in that universal mind in spite of the fact that most people in our country are not very well educated. In fact, I am sorry to say this, they're both technically and historically illiterate. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on in the Middle East, for example. They don't realize, for example, that this guy Saddam Hussein that we overthrew, they seem to forget that he was our man. Most people don't realize it was John F. Kennedy, and when the CIA and the Kennedy administration put Saddam Hussein in power in a brutal coup. And he was our ally for 6 presidents. He did everything, and by the way, just before we destroyed Iraq, which is the only reason ISIS now exists, is because we went over there and destroyed Saddam Hussein's government and everything about it. We destroyed the cradle of civilization. And what did we do that for? For a company called Halliburton. Because Dick Cheney, who was the vice president, he was a CEO of Halliburton, and for 30 years, there's a 60 Minutes report. If anybody wants to go see it, you can still see it. How Cheney went back and forth between the Defense Department as a high-level official back to Halliburton. And so he had Halliburton embedded with a cost-plus contract, secret, of course, and all he needed was a war. And he could have picked any country, but he picked Iraq because he thought, well, God, that's got more oil than any place else. Let's do that. I don't even think Bush had a clue. It was Cheney's. He was the real puppet master in this whole thing, and he made fortunes for his company. But he destroyed Iraq. And let me tell you something. We say how bad Saddam Hussein was. But any historian who knows the facts knows that Saddam Hussein had the only westernized nation in the entire Middle East. And let me explain that. Women in Saddam's country had every equal power as men do, and did, I should say. They don't anymore. But when Saddam was in power, women could actually divorce their husbands. They could not only drive cars, he had them in the military, highest levels of officers. He had women in every high-level capacity of his government. He was trying to be our man. And before he invaded Kuwait, he went to our ambassador, April Gillespie was her name, and you can Google her name and get this real story. He asked for permission to. See, he didn't call it invading Kuwait. He said, look, that's territory that belongs to Iraq. It's historically been Iraq's. We want to take it back. And she said to him, and this is a matter of public record, we don't get involved in Arab border disputes. That's what our ambassador told Saddam. And so that was a green light for him to invade and take the oil from Kuwait. And then Bush Sr. started getting the box. His ambassador said it's okay, and then after he does it, we go to war with him and destroy his country. And now look what we got over there. We not only destroyed Iraq, we got millions of people flooding Europe. Because we destroyed their country. And that country's, you talk about climate change catastrophes. It's not only California that's running out of water in about a year. So is Syria. So is Iraq. We're all in trouble. There's a climate change catastrophe happening worldwide, in addition to all the military stuff we do for oil companies. And we shouldn't be, and by the way, we spent trillions of dollars for these oil companies. They use our armed forces like their personal military to go in and overthrow governments so they can go in and extract resources from those companies and poison the local people there, and they don't get any of the money. They just get the poison. We give all the money to private oil companies who are multinational companies. They have no loyalty to our country. I hear Trump talk about China stole our jobs. China didn't steal any jobs. American corporations took those jobs over to China because they could make more money. And they didn't care about our quality of life or our wages here. Or they not only exported the jobs, they exported the tooling to make the things. And all the skill and knows how to make those things. Some things that's easy to replace. It isn't. It's really hard. And now we have an educational system that's the worst of the industrialized world. People in Congress, they don't even understand high school chemistry, which is why we're a big part of the mess we're in. So we have all kinds of issues, but we have to have somebody as president who understands the scope and nature of these problems And also, what do you do about it? The first thing you do is put the majority in charge. You get rid of lobbying and bribery of government officials. Make it illegal. That's what the majority will do. Then I will serve at the majority. Then as president, I will recommend it to the majority that we immediately shut down the oil and nuclear industrial complex. And we're going to shift with wartime speed. When I told you we need 2 million wind turbines to run the entire country, they're no more difficult to build than automobiles. And you know how many automobiles we've built in this country last year? Want to guess?
Oh, maybe 30 million.
16 million.
16 million, that's a lot.
We only need 2 million wind turbines to run the entire country forever. Mm-hmm. They never run out. Nothing's ever depleted. Nothing's ever used up. Yeah, you're making the hydrogen from water, but when you burn it as fuel, you get the water back and it's crystal clear, pure. When it comes out of your exhaust, it's the only pure water on the earth is what comes out of a hydrogen fuel internal combustion engine. That's how amazing this story is. So, yeah, I'm all wrapped up in this, and the other stuff these candidates are talking about, I think it's nonsense.
Okay.
None of them are even aware that there's a mass extinction event going on.
Okay. We've deviated a lot from the format I usually follow, but that's okay. You've really
sure.
you've covered most of the questions, just not as directly as normal. There are a few questions. There are a few questions though that you haven't touched, and I would still like to ask you these. What is your stance on taxes?
Taxes? Oh, my stance is I like the Eisenhower rates. For wealthy people, the richest people, they were 92%.
Okay.
And I think for the bankers, I'd even increase that. Well, first off, let me tell you, if anybody ever reads the quotes by Thomas Jefferson about bankers, he said, never let the bankers be privately owned. If you let the bankers become privately owned, they will do more damage to your country than any foreign invading army could. And he was right then, and he's right now. We've bailed those banks, the big Wall Street banks would all be out of business right now if they weren't bailed out with trillions of dollars of printed money. That makes them our banks. I mean, the banks should be publicly owned banks. Why do we need these gambling casino bankers anyway? That's not the way we should be running banks, in my opinion. They're all based on making profits for themselves. And we need to end that. And let me talk to you about something else. When we talk about getting rid of the oil companies, the reason the oil companies know all about hydrogen because they can't make gasoline without it. Gasoline is mostly hydrogen. And they get all their gasoline not from water, the clean way. They get it from natural gas, the dirty way. And there's nothing dirtier than fracking of natural gas. And anybody that doesn't understand how poisoning fracking is, oh my heavens, it's only how sane does it make sense that you're going to inject millions of gallons? First, you're going to poison millions of gallons of water with some of the worst chemicals known, like diesel fuel and the whole list of other chemicals. And then they inject that down into these people's property, and they walk away and leave it. And what they don't seem to understand, and this is why every man, woman, and child has been contaminated, there's a law in physics that's worth 10 seconds here to explain. It's called the Law of Diffusion. Mm-hmm. It happens every time you pour cream into coffee. And you've seen that reaction, have you not, Lee?
Yes.
You know how it happens in seconds, right? How that cream diffuses in the cup. Well, you put a little poison in that water, it diffuses just as fast as the cream. That's why we have it in our blood. Because when you poison that river or poison the oceans, it all comes back to us. We get it in our body. So the answer is stop making all these poisons. Stop immediately.
Here's a side question for you that's somewhat tangential to what you've been talking about. The issue of fluoride in the water, do you view that as something that is harmful or beneficial?
It's absolutely harmful. It's a highly toxic substance. So is chlorine. The only reason they put chlorine in the water is because it kills bacteria. Yeah, it does because it's a toxic substance. But no, I don't drink tap water. I haven't for years. You don't know what's in the water. Let me just tell you, there's over 100,000 toxic chemicals in the environment now that have been mass-produced for 100 years. No one knows about how many there are, where they are, or how much of them. Nobody's ever done a blood test, for example. When they test for poisons in your blood, like they did for these infants, the kids, even the babies before they're born are checked, they look for maybe only 200 poisons. They don't look for 10,000 or 100,000 poisons, because that's how many there are, and you have to do a separate blood test for each and every chemical poison. You know, they put a blood test like that, you'd have to be testing for over 100,000 substances, and even the people in the government are supposed to be in charge of this, the Toxic Substances Control people, they will tell you they have no idea how many, there is no regulation in our country. None. They just mass produce it, and that's what they've been doing, and that's why we're in so much trouble.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Sure.
Can you describe your stance on the abortion pro-choice issue?
Yes, and I want to be real clear on this. There's another element to this mass extinction event. In addition to poisoning our planet, we are overpopulating it. And overpopulation is driving, this is what Professor Bartlett talks about also in his videos on exponential growth. Yes, there's no more graphic example of that than the human population. And the scientists who do these kinds of studies show a direct corollary. As the human population goes up, the planet dies because we're killing it. We're like cancer cells inside the body. And let me explain, let me qualify that statement. We're like some cancer cells inside the body, because most people don't realize that according to what's now known, over 80% of the cancer cells in our body are not malignant, which means they don't grow out of control and kill us. They are benign, which means they're good guys in the sense that they're not going to kill us. We're not going to die from these cancers. We're going to die with them, not from them. So all these people getting all this radiation therapy and cancer therapy, that'll kill you, because that's poison. But in 80% of cases, you shouldn't be taking it at all. But in the cases where cancer becomes malignant, and therefore lethal, it's because it grows out of control. It won't stop growing. And the human population has been growing out of control, oh God, ever since the Industrial Revolution, it really took off. It's way out of control now worldwide. It's a major factor in this mass extinction event. And therefore, as dreadful as you might think abortion is, a mass extinction event, I would argue, is much more awful than that. So we need to encourage, especially poor women, young women, who, when you consider it takes right now over $250,000 to raise a child in the United States, and that does not include sending them to college. And when we talk about all these babies, who's going to pay for them? Our government is broke. We're at $200 trillion in debt if you look at the real numbers of unfunded liabilities. They don't even publish those numbers anymore. They're so big. It's not just the $18 trillion that they tell you about. It's the unfunded liabilities for Medicare and Social Security. All those things are broke. This is a government of paper-printed money. And it's collapsing worldwide. If you haven't been watching, stock market today is down another 300 points as we speak, because there's nothing holding it up. There's nothing behind this. It's a house of cards that's collapsing. So, yeah, we have far too many people, and we should be encouraging women to have abortions. Make it easy for them, not hard, because the overpopulation is the biggest problem we have that's driving all these other problems. It would help if we were on a hydrogen economy that's not toxic. Unfortunately, we not only have a lot of people, but we base everything on poison.
Okay. How would you handle the issue of immigration and border security?
With the first, because of that overpopulation problem, my recommendation to the majority would be we don't need any new immigrants as of this point at all. And we don't want to take jurisdiction over the millions of people that are here illegally. Mm-hmm. And the word jurisdiction is if anybody bothers to read the 14th Amendment. You're not a citizen unless your children are not American citizens unless the parents are. And there's a Supreme Court ruling in 1870 on this very subject to clarify that 14th Amendment that nobody talks about. I've got a press release on it citing that Supreme Court decision. It clearly says it's all related to where the parents' nationality status is. And since all these people who are here illegally, our government has no jurisdiction over them since they came here illegally, that means their children are not citizens. Period. End of story. So, now why is that important? Well, because in a real democracy, suddenly voters aren't just observers anymore, watching what the politicians do in secret. In a real democracy, the majority's in charge. They're running things. So it's pretty important to know who really is a citizen now. And let me also say that in Canada, they don't have any laws up in Canada, and they don't have any immigration problems in Canada. And you want to know why? Because I read why. Because they were interviewing these immigrants. Why don't you go to Canada where they have free health care? And the immigrants responded, not for us, they don't. We don't get free anything if we go to Canada. That's why we come to the United States. That's where we get free health care, is come to the United States, not Canada. That is the problem. Why are we giving these illegal people who come here free health care when we're broke, and when we don't even give it to our own citizens? We watch them go bankrupt. They don't get free health care. How do the illegal immigrants get free health care? Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Makes sense. Another question.
Oh, let me finish.
Go ahead.
Let me finish that story. So you stop all the financial incentives for people to come here. Like we want to do the same thing we do in Canada. Don't give them any financial incentive to come here because we don't need any more people. I just in every country, every community I go in this country is overpopulated. When you try to get to work, I try to get to Atlanta. It takes me 3 hours and I live 40 miles away. Everywhere I go, it's like this. We got to get control of this, and I agree with Trump on that. That nobody even talks about this immigration issue. It's a major, major problem that's affecting. We got 95 million people unemployed in this country, and we're bringing other people in. And let me just say about that border. I don't just propose a wall. I propose we got 28,000 troops guarding the border of Korea. 28,000 Americans we pay to guard Korea's border. Get those people over here and put them on the southern border. Set up a permanent entire military installation from one end of that border to the other. You don't necessarily need a wall all through it, but you need to have what I'm proposing is build as much as a wall are what are called lifeboat food production systems, which are at the heart of my solutions that. And let me just explain. A lifeboat system means an indoor agricultural system. Indoors, meaning it doesn't matter what the weather's doing. And these are being in use around the world. Countries like Denmark have made themselves wealthy. Denmark's up in northern Europe, and in the middle of winter it's freezing. But you can go in their gigantic indoor agricultural buildings where they are growing tomatoes, and they're growing lettuce, and they're growing fruit, and they're growing everything that you need, and they pack it and ship it worldwide overnight. They don't even send it to their customers. They don't pick the fruit off the vine until they get the order from the supermarket kind of thing. And if you power that system with wind and hydrogen, that means it would survive the worst climate change catastrophes we could anticipate. And by the way, food production systems are already collapsing worldwide because of this climate change, the droughts, the floods, the superstorms, all of it is destroying our food production. And by the way, the food we're now growing getting fit to eat anyway. So what we need to do is build these lifeboat systems because we need the food. We have to hire millions of people to run, of course, because we want to put these lifeboats in every community. But we've got a huge border region that we want to build a big bunch of them down there, because then you're going to have an entire infrastructure that's going to create $1 billion industry to pay for the wall or whatever facility you're going to have down there to get a control on who comes in and out of our country.
All right. Sounds good. Where do you stand on the issue of personal privacy, but also the need to protect your nation from quote-unquote terrorism?
Well, yeah, this terrorism thing, I'm sick of hearing that word. I like to remind people that all of our founding fathers were terrorists, according to King George. That was the word used for them. So you got to be careful with that word. Because when I see what's going on, we're dropping bombs on people every day. We have no idea who they are. And by the way, these bombs we're dropping are all tipped with uranium. 238. One of the worst isotopes there is. It has a half-life of 4.5 billion, that's B-I-L-L-I-O-N, not million, but billion years. And we blow these things up every day. And when you do that, remember that physics lesson about diffusion, you blow up that bomb in Iraq, the dust and from the particles of uranium that are going to be deadly to the end of the universe are going to be blowing over the United States in a matter of a year or two, or sooner, in the winds. This is crazy what we do. Why are we even doing that? We went an entire World War II without using toxic weapons, and most people don't realize where all the high explosives came from, but they came from cannabis, which, people use the word marijuana. I don't use that word because it's a mongrel term that doesn't have anything to do with science. And I cite that mongrel term from the head of the AMA, American Medical Association, who was testifying before Congress when they were trying to make cannabis illegal in 1937, and they were successful, obviously, but only the AMA objected vehemently to making cannabis illegal because it was used in so many of their drugs, and that they had no evidence it was ever a dangerous drug. In fact, what we now know is the THC in cannabis that everybody gets high with, and they think that's destroying your brain, that turns out to be a big lie, too. As it turns out, in the scientific literature that's been published, and I can give you a citation on it, it's Scientific American in December of 2004, a couple of medical professors who actually are good at following where does the THC in the brain go, they found it is, in fact, a 500 million year-old neurotransmitter. It's not a drug at all. It's a neurotransmitter. Wow, what does that mean? That means your brain can't function properly without it. And everybody's brain has these cannabinoid proteins, receptors, like little fingers waiting to grab that molecule. And they have more receptors for THC than anything else they've seen in the brain, including vitamin D3. It shocked these researchers. So to suggest, that cannabis is even a drug is absurd. In fact, there's a professor of medicine at Harvard University. His name is Lester Grinspoon, Grinspoon, and he has coined the term cannabinopathic medicine because if you read the medical literature about the history of cannabis, it's been used as a medicine since humans have been keeping written records in every culture. And it's the only substance that's non-toxic. There is no toxic amount. There's toxic levels for morphine. There's toxic levels for aspirin. There's toxic levels for all the pharmaceutical drugs. They're all dangerous and toxic. And we wouldn't be using them if we had just kept using the cannabinopathic medicine, where cannabis was used for 25 different treatments, and this is on the AMA websites, the American Cancer Society websites. In fact, there's a movie on YouTube called The True History of Marijuana. And if you haven't seen it, have you seen that one, Ray?
I have not seen that one.
Oh, my God, you need to see it. It's better than anything you're going to see in the movie theaters. It goes on for about an hour and a half. The BBC participated in producing this film. It's a historical of the whole history, and it explains the story of how the oil company lobbyists were the ones behind making cannabis illegal because Henry Ford had been running his cars on ethanol made from cannabis. In fact, it was his own farm that he was growing the cannabis on, and he was not just making fuels that were much cleaner burning than gasoline by an order of magnitude, but he was making plastics for their car parts, like the hoods and fenders. And you can go on YouTube and Google Henry Ford's cannabis cars or Henry Ford's hemp cars or whatever you want to call them. A lot of names for that substance. But he's shown, and you can see these, some of them even have audio with him, where he's standing or other engineers are behind a brand new car, the rear deck of the trunk, hitting it as hard as they can with a giant axe. Repeatedly, banging it as hard as they can, and it doesn't even leave a scratch. These were plastics made by cannabis in the oil of the seeds. And those plastics, we right now have poisoned our oceans with plastics made from oil that are not natural. And this all had to, if we had not made cannabis illegal in 1937, we would not have poisoned the entire planet like we have now done. That's how serious this is. So we need to go back to a cannabis economy where everything in the oil is now used to make, clothes, shoes, fibers of all kinds. Cannabis fibers are far superior. If you have a shirt made of cannabis fibers, it will last for the rest of your life. They're the strongest known fibers. That's why every sailing ship at sea in every civilization had to have ropes and sails. In fact, the word canvas comes as another word that really means canvas. And cannabis is an ancient Greek word, only it's spelled with a K instead of a C, but other than that, it's identical. And the Greeks made the first democracy, too, which they ascribe to the scholars who study that kind of stuff, because cannabis was a part of their economy. It was every civilization, because if you didn't have cannabis technology for sails and ropes and rigging, your ship wouldn't get out of the harbor. So every seafaring civilization had to be masters of that technology. And what's even more amazing, in World War II, what most people don't realize, there's another movie on YouTube by the FDA, that's the Federal Department of Agriculture. In World War II, even though at the time it had been illegal, because remember it was made illegal in 1937, now World War II, and the U.S. government actually had to set up its own public cannabis company to grow cannabis all along the railroad lines. And what do you think they were using it for in World War II? They didn't have any sails on the ships, right? So no ropes of the normal kind. What were they using the cannabis for? I'll tell you what. DuPont, here's the big chemical company involved in all of this, knew all about cannabis because that's where they made all of the TNT and the high explosives that won the war. Was from cannabis.
Interesting.
Nitriding cannabis cellulose. That's how they made all the high explosives. And those are non-toxic explosives. They're very powerful, but they don't leave any toxic residue when you blow them up. Why aren't we using those?
Got me.
Yeah. Anyway, let me just finish this thought about Henry Ford, because we all know he mass-produced cars, but nobody knows that he pioneered this concept of he was going to put the oil companies out of business by just producing everything the oil companies produce from crops, or not even crops. As Ford pointed out, you could make ethanol from weeds. Anything biological, you can ferment and make alcohol. And that's why they had to make, that's why they came after Ford, and particularly this cannabis thing, and put him out of business. He couldn't use it. But all of his early cars were all running on cannabis-based fuels. We never needed gasoline and oil, ever.
Okay.
That's the moral of the story there. Go ahead to your next question. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to make those important points that we need to go back to the cannabis economy, because that's the only one that's sustainable, where you can make everything and not poison yourself in the process.
All right. I think in a very roundabout way and in a very unscripted way, you've answered all of the questions I was going to ask, at least to some extent. Is there anything else you'd like to say before closing the interview?
Well, I'll just mention Yellowstone.
Go for it.
There's a number of mass extinction events that are taking place, but Yellowstone, it's a super volcano. And it could go off tomorrow. And this thing only goes off every 600 and some thousand years. It's a monster. It's the largest caldera of its type on the planet. And we are doing nothing to get ready for that either. And there's another supervolcano in California, up in the Mammoth area. And that one is right near Mammoth. And it's almost as big as Yellowstone, and it's ready to go any moment. And it sits right on the Pacific plate that's about to move, because the other four corners of the Pacific plate and the Pacific Ocean have already moved with terrible earthquakes and disasters where it happened. But the plate on the U.S. hasn't, but it's going to, and it's going to soon. And when that goes, it could trip the major overdue supervolcano in California, the shock wave could easily trip off Yellowstone too. So these are incredible calamities that we as a people are totally unprepared for. And that's the kind of thing these lifeboat food production systems I mentioned earlier would also allow us to survive that too, because you could grow food indoors under optimum conditions 24 hours a day and survive these things. If you don't have those indoor food production systems, we as a civilization will disappear. That's what's on the table.
Okay. And time for some closing remarks. In about 2 minutes or less, can you tell us why we should vote for you? Although I'm pretty sure you've covered that already, but just...
Well, I would just say this. None of the other candidates running in either party have mentioned any of these things we just talked about. And in my view, from the world according to Braun, these issues, any one of the issues we just talked about, dwarf anything that they're now discussing. I mean, every one of the candidates right now wants to go and bomb more people in the Middle East. So that's going to solve more problems. When it's utter chaos over there. We have other chaos in our own country. And by the way, let me just say this. The FBI has a report of a number of illegal Central American gang members they've arrested in this country. They've arrested already 1.4 million of these people. And when you look at pictures of these people with tattoos from their toes to their nose, they are committing half of all the violent crimes in the United States right now. That's according to the FBI website. So your caliphate in the United States dwarfs ISIS. ISIS maybe has 25,000 people. We've got millions of these other people, and they're only in here. The only reason these Central American drug gangs can be in business is because of our drug laws. Mm-hmm. If cannabis was legal, and all these other drugs were legal, well, what would the gangs be doing for money? That's what we've got to do. So we need to, that's to sum it up. The answers are right here, they're right in front of us. And by the way, we should be letting everybody who's in prison right now, which we spend a fortune on prisons, most of those people are in there on these stupid drug charges that have what they call victimless crimes, crimes with no victims. How can you have a crime for no victim that you're putting people in prison for? It's crazy. And it's also unconstitutional. By the way, when they made alcohol illegal, they had to get a constitutional amendment to do it. Mm-hmm. I've never seen that for cannabis, have you?
Have not. Good point.
And not one Supreme Court justice stood up for the Constitution. Not one, ever. And millions of our fellow citizens have been imprisoned and had their lives ruined, many of them killed in the process of these stupid drug laws. Also, oil companies could create vast wealth to bribe every member of Congress worldwide, which is what they do. And only by putting the majority of people in charge is any of this going to change. But we don't have a lot of time. There's a mass extinction event going on. We need to take action now, so people need to go to that Democracy Amendment website, download that ballot long before the next election. We can't wait another year. Let me just say that. We need to move with a sense of purpose and urgency. Otherwise, people aren't going to make it. I mean, they're not going to survive, period. That's the bottom line.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Braun, for the interview. Thanks again to my listeners for listening to the presidential interviews. Be sure to check
Thank you for your thoughtful list of questions, Lee.
Hey, no problem. Thanks again for the interview, and I hope you have a good day.
And you too.
Okay, bye.